Everyone has a bright light inside of them that deserves to be seen by the world. That's why it's time to shine the light on the extraordinary who are accomplishing phenomenal things. This is the Shine Out Loud Show with Lillian Ogbogo.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever in the world you are. Yes. It's another episode of the Shine Out Loud Show. And I have a couple here because we're talking about fertility, we're talking about well-being, we're talking about the Fertility Zone. So I have Alex and Natalie Mutambudzi, and they're going to talk to us about their journey to creating a family. And that journey has led to creating a business and creating a service. That journey is a journey, they say a journey starts with one step of 1,000 steps. This journey had taken them through highs and lows. And I'll have you share this journey with them because it's something that we in the community need to start talking about more and more, especially around the conversation around fertility and the issues around our fertility. So Alex, Natalie, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having us, and that's a great introduction.
You're welcome. So let's talk about your journey. So take it back to the very beginning. So you are now parents to a lovely young person in the world, but what was that journey to get that person into this world like?
It was a very long journey. Alex and I got married in 2008 and almost immediately wanted to start a family. It was not a straightforward journey because it just did not naturally happen. And I think any couple getting married just expects it to just naturally happen. After trying for several years, in 2013, we finally took a step of trying to seek medical help for that journey. Right. Because having a very strong Christian faith, we took the approach that if we just pray enough, if we just trust enough, it would come through. And that wasn't the route for us.
Right. So
in 2013, we started seeking medical assistance, started having tests, started seeing our GP. Well, I think it was actually 2012 we started seeing the GP and started some of the investigations kicked off in 2013, okay, which then led us to the IVF journey that we went on. It's kicked off from about 2013, 2014 till we had Joshua in 2019 last year.
Okay. So when you start looking at that journey, there seems to be so much conflicting information around hormones that it's hard to know where to start and what the basic offer us to know what to do. How did you actually start to get clear from the facts, the fiction, the myths along that journey?
I think what was important for us was to own our journey, taking ownership of our journey. And I think also it's starting like buying literature, finding out information, reading blogs, getting online, speaking to other people in similar circumstances, because often you go to the doctor and it's a one size fits all. I mean, one very common myth is that every woman ovulates at day 14. That's not true, and it's being able to debunk certain myths within the fertility journey and finding out what works for you. And I think another issue is, especially for women, and I speak as a woman of color, is we don't know our bodies. We don't understand what's going on with our bodies, because for so long you're turning off all the signs for fertility, and then suddenly you get married and you expect to be fertile immediately.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just to add to that, is that I remember when we started looking at this in terms of doing the research for, what do we need to look at in terms of an IVF clinic, for example.
Yeah.
And the knowledge that we had at that point versus what we learned along the way. I mean, we were so green at the time, and we thought assisted fertility was a silver bullet that would just solve all the problems. And then what you learn, as Natalie said, is you learn more about yourself. You start to realize that, it's not that simple. I think the key thing is the ownership of the journey. You need to own it. no one's coming. No one's going to come and solve the problem for you, right? You have to own the fact that, okay, look, I need to solve this, and really just do the research that's required.
Yes, and if I think of some of the research we did, it was everything from reading other people's journeys to reading medical journals to fully understanding some of the things that we were going through at different stages of the journey that finally led to our success.
Right. And, Alex, you talked about that ownership of the journey. And I think that there is still that whole thing around, well, the medical practice should have more information. So when we start that path to ownership, what are the top questions that women and men should be asking their doctors to actually start taking charge of their fertility?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And, it's a great question mainly because, as men, I think with women, there's this expectation of what you should understand and know about your body, et cetera, et cetera. I think as men, not to say that we don't understand our bodies, it's just that when it comes to fertility, there's this assumption that, well, we're good, and then as Black men, it's, well, I mean, I don't need that. I'm good. And there's a myth about how fertile we are. I mean, this is well documented in media and in the press and and in social media and in just popular media that, Black men are supposed to be fertile.
Yeah.
What that sort of like mental position does for you is that it makes you feel like you don't have to seek help or you don't have to ask the right questions. Now, in terms of the questions you should be asking is, there's some things that are very basic that you can do to check to see, are you okay? You get, as a man, you can go get sort of like your sperm analysis done. That might sound like, that might sound heavy, that might sound loaded, but it is the right thing to do. And it's good to know where you stand because, there's a lot of remedies that you can quickly implement if the results are less favorable than you would like. And then for women, it's also doing the same thing, asking the same similar questions with regards to your body, your cycle, and then again, some of the remedies are quick to sort of like fix, in terms of diet, in terms of lifestyle, etc. But I think going back to the ownership, you need to be honest with yourself, you need to ask those questions. And you need to seek help. There's nothing wrong with seeking help, and there's nothing wrong with trying to get help, and there's nothing wrong with in the event that you go to your GP and you get a less than favorable outcome with regards to tests, etc. There's no harm doing the research, or like what Natalie said. We did a lot of reading of journals, like books that we would not normally read, just to try and understand the challenges that we had. So you have to be open-minded, in addition to owning the journey, be open-minded to what the solution can be.
Yes, and I would say as well, don't expect the doctors to have all the answers because you are the specialist on you, on your cycle, on your body. You are with you every day. You know what's working and what's not.
Right. But Natalie, you bring up a particular point because you actually, a couple of questions ago, where you say, we turn off all our symptoms for fertility. We've been taught, nope, shut that down. And all of a sudden you're supposed to go, okay, now I'm fertile. A lot of women for a better choice of words, are divorced from their own bodies. Yes. So what is the first thing that you would advise any woman to start doing to get actually checking in with her body to know, am I fertile? Am I still fertile? Is there something wrong? What are the first things that you could consider that they should look for?
Okay, I think, if I think of it just in certain terms, you take your car for an MOT every year. How often do you actually stop and just have a medical? And it's not necessarily just only fertility focused, but if you think of, for example, if you're doing gardening, you can't just throw seeds in the ground and expect them to take root. Mm-hmm. Same thing with your body. I think, watch your cycles. What are your cycles like? I remember one of the really in-depth conversations I had with my acupuncturist, and he asked me more questions about my period than I'd ever asked myself. Mm-hmm. With regards to the flow, frequency. Chart your cycles. I think that's really important. Are you actually charting your cycles? Are you aware, am I having a cycle every 28 days, or am I having no cycles? If you're not having any cycles, question that. Yeah. If a cycle is too short, question that too. There's also other tests that are recommended to check kind of ovarian reserve, and one of them is an AMH test. Mm-hmm. That's regarded as one way of checking ovarian reserve, but it is known that can fluctuate and change. Yes, there's a decline after the age of 35. However, you can do things to help preserve your ovarian reserve. And it's also, as Alex was saying, lifestyle. What are you eating? What are you drinking? Are you exercising? But I think it starts with you, and it starts with your cycle. Mm-hmm. And that's where you should start. That's the very first point. And yes, you can go see a GP and ask to have a full hormone panel done. Mm-hmm. Often they'll fob you off. And I think also we need to learn as women, and I speak as a woman of color, of taking charge and paying for these things. If the GP is saying no, go and have it done privately. Take charge of it. That is really important.
And I think that question, that point there where you say take charge, go pay for it. There's some people that's like, well, I can't. What else can I do? But I think there's this. We need to stop and recognize, as women of color, as people of color, both men and women. There's this whole. We know in the medical profession it's been shown that Black women are taken less seriously when they're complaining about certain symptoms, and as well as Black men. So how can you make sure that you are heard? And I ask this, and I know that you're not experts, but you are a couple who've gone through that journey, and that makes you an expert in your personal journey. Mm-hmm. How can you make sure that you are heard?
I think for me, it's don't be fobbed off. Keep going back. Ask for a second opinion. Yes, if you can't afford to go privately, keep going back to your medical professional. Ask for a second opinion, and don't agree to be just pushed to the side. Mm-hmm. But, keep going back. Eventually, they'll either give you an answer or ask for a referral. If you feel that they're not a specialist in their field, or find a specialist in that field and ask for a referral and see the specialist. And, just keep going. Do not give up. Be tenacious.
Yeah, and what I'll add to that is that, it's your life. Yeah. It's your body. You're not just a scientific experiment.
No.
So therefore, we were quite aggressive. So when we say take ownership, it's a very sort of like polite way, but really you need to be aggressive about your health. You need to take it seriously, is what I'm saying. And therefore, to that extent, ask the difficult questions. And if you don't feel like you're getting the kind of, response that or the level of sort of like detail to sort of like explain what you think the problem what you think the problem is, keep asking. Mm-hmm. I'll give you an example. So like, we would, pay for consultations, whereby there would be something like, 200, 300 pounds for half an hour. Mm-hmm. Now, if I'm paying 200 pounds or 300 pounds for half an hour, I want my half an hour. Not only that, all the questions that I have, I want them answered.
Yeah.
Now, one of the other things that we learned along the way, and I'm probably jumping around here, but it will make sense, is that, in fertility, they've got this thing called unexplained fertility. Just to add to, the gravitas of the question you just asked. Unexplained fertility. Well, there's no such thing. Unexplained fertility means you can't explain what the problem is. But it doesn't mean that there isn't an explanation for what the problem is, right? So it's about just being really stubborn in your pursuit to understand or to get a a decent explanation about what the challenges you're going through are, that will then eventually help you.
And that's important. I mean, asking the questions, being persistent, that's necessary, because even just outside of the fertility conversation, with our day-to-day health requirements, because sometimes doctors have biases and will sometimes no, there's nothing wrong, and we've known of some serious cases where it's been nothing wrong, oops, there's something wrong. And I think that is actually the key here, is actually that ownership. Now, looking at it, we've talked about from a perspective of how the ideology of the ever fertile Black man can interfere with men going to get into help. But there's also this idea that, especially, let's be fair, in culture, from a cultural perspective, it's never the man's fault. The problem is always the woman. So how do you now start having to navigate those kind of relationships while you're going on this journey and you're dealing with it, and you're having people going, so what's wrong with your wife? And people,
So the reason why we're laughing, right? The reason why we're laughing is that, so like Natalie said, we got married in 2008. Around 2012, we started sort of like, well, something's not right here. And and by the way, you've got family members who are reminding you, right, ever so often that, well, wait a minute, how come there isn't a baby in the family, right? You're constantly getting reminded when you go to family events, in some cases when you go to church, your friends, so what I found was that initially, because I've got 2 children from a previous marriage, the automatic sort of like eyes would be on Natalie, as in, okay, well, wait a minute, what's wrong with you? That's kind of how it felt, although it wasn't explicitly said, of how it felt. But what we did actually was, we were honest with ourselves. Like I'm laughing because at one point we went to Greece, and we were having all of these tests done, and Natalie goes to, I can't remember the
I went to the clinic and I went on my own. And the first question she said to me is, where's your husband?
But more so, it was like, well, so Natalie gets these tests done. And I'm actually, it was a Friday afternoon, I'm doing these calls with work and whatnot. And then I get a call that, well, actually, do not write, the doctor, the consultant wants you here ASAP and wants you to drop a sample.
And you had 30 minutes to do that.
Right? It was
no pressure whatsoever.
Talk about pressure, talk about having to perform, to drop a hat. But let's say we got it all done, right? But the point is, and the reason why I'm sharing this openly, is that it's really important as Black men for us to also get ourselves checked out, and just have the conversation and be open about it, because, in some cases, what you may find is that, I know that, Black women are disproportionately affected when it comes to infertility. One of the things, if you look at miscarriages as an example, right, whereby, if you look at your white counterparts, it's like 9.5%. Black folks, it's about 13% in the UK.
Wow.
Miscarriages. Yeah. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning miscarriages specifically is that in some cases, it could be sperm DNA fragmentation, which is the man, right? And it's not something, it's not until you speak to a specialist that you start to understand why some of these challenges occur. And it's not always, although it manifests and it shows within the woman, sometimes the cause is the man. And unless you sort of like open and honest with yourself to have the test done, etc., you
okay.
know.
So let's ask,
fix it.
what's sperm DNA fragmentation? What is that?
So basically, without getting technical, and I don't want to pretend like I know everything about the sperm and and sperm DNA fragmentation, but I'll just sort of like give you a very simplified Alex Mutambudzi version, right? Which is, there is a way that the sperm is supposed to function, and how it's supposed to look, and how it is supposed to behave.
Yeah.
During fertilization. Now, sometimes you have sperm whereby the tail is not there, it's not right, or the DNA within the sperm is not as how it should be. Now, there's a certain level whereby there's a certain percentage that is fragmented anyway, regardless of age. But what you find is that either if you don't have the right lifestyle or not in the right diet, or you're older, there is more fragmentation, meaning that the sperm is not as healthy as it should be.
Right.
And there's a lot of ways that you can fix that. You can fix that through antibiotics. You can fix that through diet, lifestyle, supplements. It's fixable. And this is why I'm saying it's important to get these tests done. Because once you know what the problem is,
you know the fix.
Yeah.
So you're gonna say.
And still on this subject of sperm DNA fragmentation and miscarriages, is often the sperm is, it's good enough to create a pregnancy, but to maintain the pregnancy to a live birth, that isn't always the case. So I think I find a lot of couples say, oh, but they are getting pregnant. It's not infertility. Infertility is the inability to carry a pregnancy to term.
Right.
So a lot of couples, especially in our communities, because we speak to quite a few couples, they say, oh, it's not infertility, we're getting pregnant. And that's not it. It's the ability to carry that pregnancy to term.
And I think there's still that stigma, that we could just sit here and talk about the stigma, the shame, all of that surrounds our community when it comes to that topic that, oh, it can't be that, and you both touched on something at the very beginning when you talked about your Christian faith and your Christian lifestyle. And Alex, we've had that conversation prior when we talked about churches, and, where you told me that really, I'll use the word fantastic story, because it was just, on one side it was so bad, on the other side you had the other version of it, where you met that couple who were being ostracized by their church because they were looking for methods and ways that were medically sound to help them conceive, and they're like, oh, you have no faith because you're not praying. It's like, yeah, but I could have sworn in the Bible it says something about prayer without, work doesn't really work. But hey, what do I know? And you had on the other side, you had that pastor who was actually at fertility fairs looking for options for her congregation on what is out there, what's possible. So I guess my question around that is, what can the Christian faith do to support their congregation better? Because just telling them to pray is not the only solution.
Yes, I mean, we went through it, right? We went through it whereby, the experience that we had was of, if you're so prayerful, well, why don't you have the solution that you're praying for? And what we ended up doing. Sorry, can you hear our son?
Yes.
You can.
Yes.
He's with his grandma at the minute.
I mean, this interview is about him, so he's being vocal, like letting you guys know that I'm still in the room. I'm here.
So, I mean, just reflecting on those two stories, right? I think the church needs to be more practical and more supportive. And I'd kind of lean towards, the kind of leadership that the pastor who came to the fertility show in 2018 and was actually trying to get information that she could share with the congregation, because we're saying that, a lot of young women in the church, they feel handicapped because, they believe and they're waiting for the big bang miracle to happen. And yet sometimes it's just doing the practical thing of just going to, it's no different from taking medication for a cold or or a headache, really.
Yeah.
It's taking ownership of your health. And prayer does work too. We strong Christians, we take our faith very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only issue that we've had, or that we would like to express, is that to sort of like just isolate prayer as the single the single solution for this particular problem, without taking the ownership upon yourself,
mm-hmm.
is not going to help you.
No.
And that's what we found in our experience. And
yes.
we were torn about this, right? We prayed hard about it.
For years.
Torn for years.
We prayed, we fasted, we got prophecy, you name it. We did the full 9 yards. And I think what was actually freeing for me was speaking to a pastor, and a pastor saying it's okay to go the fertility route. It's okay because you're doing it prayerfully. And I think we need to be practical in our faith, because very often as Christians, we do this name it, claim it, and then we expect like manna stuff to fall from heaven. But as you touched on, faith without works is dead. Sometimes you've got to take that step out, and realizing as well that as much as you're going to the clinic, and I remember one of our failed cycles, our consultant saying to me, I can only do so much. And for me, that was confirmation as a Christian that he can do so much. It's only God who would do the rest. And that put me at ease.
Yeah, and so I think that needs to be explored more, and I think we need in the community more pastors like that woman who was actually taking the practical steps. And there are a couple of things you touched on, Natalie. So first and foremost, how did you personally deal with the setbacks, the miscarriages? How did both of you deal with that? Because again, normally the burden is it's on the woman. How did both of you actually navigate that journey of the miscarriages?
I think, first of all, before going into any cycle or any fertility journey, the marriage needs to be strong. Because if you do not have a strong foundation, you cannot do this. And I think as a lot of the time, there is the focus on the women, and there's a lot of loss. And I think a lot of the time Alex was comforting me. He was doing all the comforting. And then at one point I had to also realize that we have to support each other. Mm-hmm. Yes, I had support from, there's a fertility community we belong to. I had support from my sisters, from our moms, from the close family. But I would say at the end of the day, Alex was my rock, and vice versa. I remember the final cycle and sitting there and just saying, I couldn't do it. I just could not do it because I was just frozen with fear of another miscarriage. And Alex said to me, if I didn't do this, if I didn't do the last cycle, would I forgive myself 10 years down the line? And the answer to that was no. And I think I have a saying that one of my friends in the fertility community always quotes to me. It's roll the dice again. And I think as much as there was a lot of hurt and disappointment, it was the ability to stand up and to hope that, the day when our baby would come was on the horizon, that we just had to get up and keep trying, because it was not, we chose to go all the way. We didn't choose to go halfway and stop.
Right. Yeah. And anyone listening to this journey, anyone from the outside will go, why was it so important for you to actually have the baby? Wasn't there other options like adoptions, surrogacy? Weren't there other options than putting both of you through this mental turmoil?
It's interesting because anybody who's not involved in infertility will always bring out those other options. When it comes to costs, surrogacy, you're looking at about 100,000. That's surrogacy.
How much?
Yes. So if you've got to spare 100,000, that's okay.
Wait. Let me just digest that figure. 100,000. I thought that was, it was not legal to pay for surrogacy in the UK. How is it 100K?
It comes to about that, all the costs, and there's legalities, because as much as you don't carry the baby, you then have to adopt the baby afterwards. There's legal costs. Yes. So there's all of that comes into it, when you look at it that way. And then there's adoption. That's not I think it's not a straightforward route. I know friends who have gone the adoption route and I admire them. And it's something we did look at. But for us, I think for me, having gone through the journeys and the pain and everything, I got to the point of where I just wanted to be a mom, and I wanted to carry. That was important to me. And I think how you become a mom doesn't matter, whether that's through surrogacy or adoption. Your route to becoming a mother is very personal to you. Mm-hmm. And I think to me, it was important I carried. And I wanted my journey to count for something, and carrying meant that to me. I know friends who have done 8 cycles, given up, and gone the adoption route, and they are brilliant moms. I know friends who, for medical reasons, they are unable to carry a baby, so they have to go the surrogacy route.
I also think it comes back to the ownership.
Yeah.
So I think when you're embarking on a journey like this, and we call it a journey for a reason, right? Because I remember the first time that we said we were going to do this, right? And we said, we're going to do it just once.
Yeah, that was our Christian faith.
Right?
The name it and claim it. Right? Only once.
We're going to pray about this. We're going to do this just once, right? And then 12 cycles later, we still sort of bearing the scars of the experience. The point is, we need to really be honest. Again, for me, it's ownership, it's honesty, and it's what are you what's the outcome you're expecting? Mm-hmm. Because I think that then drives, so for us, it was important for us for Natalie to carry. Mm-hmm. That's the decision that we made.
It was our decision.
It was our decision that was personal to us.
And not to say we didn't explore other options. We did. We were open to that if we had to come to that.
Okay.
And I think it's also just our personality. We're both very driven. So as soon as one cycle was finished, what helped us continue was planning the next one and looking at ways. And I think this is where Fertility Zone was birthed. And Alex had this spreadsheet, the master spreadsheet, that I think every consultant dreaded, that we took out. This was part of the ownership of our 30 minutes we paid for. We'd take it out and they'd make a suggestion and we're like, no, that doesn't work because my body reacts this way. And I think what's also important is documenting, when you're planning a cycle, when you're planning to conceive whichever way, document the littlest things of how you feel when you wake up in the morning. Mm-hmm. I know some people do temperature, basic temperature checks, but it's the little things. And I think you get to a point of where you become so in touch with your body, what's not working and what's working.
Okay, so I like this, and I love the fact that, Natalie, you actually brought up the Fertility Zone, because we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about the spreadsheet, because you did document. And Alex, you did mention that you created this almighty spreadsheet. So what made you actually start documenting each cycle? What made you say, yes, I need to start tracking everything? What made you both do that?
Alex at heart is a number cruncher, and we have a saying, I have a saying that if anything is serious, there's a spreadsheet.
Yes. If anything. So I'm an accountant by profession, right? I'm a finance director at the minute. And well, first of all, actually, after the first cycle, it was the second cycle, and we won't say the name of the clinic, but basically we spent £7,000 with them. And by the way, it's not like we had 7,000 pounds lying around.
No.
You know, we had to, you know, eBay stuff, sell stuff.
Our bonuses went towards it.
Were just really, you know, geared to that. And I remember sort of like coming out of the clinic, because basically what happens is that before you even have the treatment, they take you into this room with an accountant, right? And they have this sort of like point of sale.
And they take your money.
They take your money before you even have a conversation with anyone else, right? With
wow.
a nurse or a consultant. And I came out feeling, you know, because the cycle didn't work. And I came out feeling robbed and just really...
I felt bamboozled after that.
Yeah, not really appreciating the full experience of that cycle. I thought, you know what, we need to understand, you know, what we did and why we had the outcome that we've had. Because it started feeling like, you know what, right? You know, there's some things that we're doing here. And surely if we were to change some of those variables, you could have a different outcome. And what also added to that, there is an appointment each time you have a failed cycle. And I'm not going to curse here, but it's the WTF appointment. That's what it's aptly called by
in the
community, right? Whereby you're asking like, what happened?
What went wrong?
Now, after that appointment, right, we were being taught to do the same thing. Now, you know, there's this saying that if you do the same thing
over and over,
and expecting a different result, then it's insanity, right? Yes. So we were like, no, we need to find a way of being able to see what the variables are, because at that point we'd done 2 cycles. Although they both failed, they failed in different ways.
Right.
So it was then, and so that's how the spreadsheet then started. So we were measuring everything from like our weight at the time, supplements we were having, what a diet or lifestyle was like at the time, the sort of like stimulant drugs
how I reacted to certain medication, outcomes on different days. And if I think going back to our first cycle, I think we were so green. We had no clue. We trusted the medical professionals that they would do everything they could, and we assumed we'd take home a baby. And I think it was that blind trust. And I would say to anybody listening to this is, do not have blind trust. Know for yourself. Do the research. Because if you're spending the money, you know, make it worth your while.
Yeah. Trust but verify. I think that's the saying.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had the spreadsheet. You tracked everything. How did the spreadsheet become the birthplace for Fertility Zone? And we're going to talk about what is the Fertility Zone.
Yeah, sure. So basically, you know, what happened was, in the latter stages of the journey, you know, like I think, you know, I'm thinking cycle 9, 10, 11, 12 here, and that's whereby we would go see a consultant, right? And then, you know, the consultant would say, like, you know, so like, what's your history? So initially we were going, you know, with bits and pieces of paper. So we just thought, well, screw that. What we did was we would just print off the spreadsheet. You know, and we would take it to the consultant. It would have everything, and they were like, "Wow, you know, this is incredible." And we were then able to make better decisions.
Yes,
you know, because when it came to the latter stages, in some cases, we were actually sort of like proposing.
Yeah,
what the treatment should
be. We
dictated
dictated our protocol. In our final cycles, we were dictating the protocol because we knew what worked and we knew what didn't work.
Yeah. And then, you know, what we then decided was, you know, having gone through that experience, is like, well, what about if you could have an app whereby you could record your treatments and record and upload your notes, as a PDF file or as a Word document or whatever. You know, if you could upload that information so that when you went to see a consultant, you know, you could just show them, or you could print it off.
Or email it. Because very often, if you're going to see a new clinic or a new consultant, you send your notes ahead of time.
Yeah.
And I remember days of like trying to gather bits of paper together and scanning it all in, and bits changing and sending it to different clinics. And it's tedious. And we were not the only ones going through that.
Okay. So that became the birthplace for Fertility Zone.
Yes.
So let's talk about what is Fertility Zone, and let's start with that. Then we'll jump in and go a bit further.
Yeah, sure. So it is a social platform for all things fertility. So where you can search for clinics, and we sort of like just launching or relaunching the version 3 of the app, whereby there's you can sort of like create groups, talk to people in groups, because from our experience, it's through that interaction with other people who are going through the same thing, whereby, people can offer each other advice, people can answer other people's questions depending on the experiences that they've gone through themselves. So it is a social platform for all things fertility, and we've got this whole exciting roadmap of all these services that we want to sort of like introduce to our community. But in a nutshell, that's what it is.
Okay.
And talking of the app, I think people in the industry think, oh, it's just infertility. It's for people going through IVF. Not necessarily. It's for people who are looking to start a family, who are curious, who want to. You could find everything from a life coach to an acupuncturist to like-minded people on the app.
Awesome. So it's basically, like you said, it's like Facebook for those who are starting the journey of creating a family with accurate information, unlike Facebook with their weird information they have now.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we have tried to do is the privacy and security.
Yes.
Fertility is a sensitive subject. The other platforms whereby it's kind of like close knitted just for women, but we are aware that we've talked about how important it is for men to sort of like get themselves checked out, etc. So it is for men, it's for women, but security, privacy have driven how we have created the app and how we've developed the app. So that theme is very visible as you navigate around the app.
Awesome. And is there space in the app for the conversations, especially for us around our community, to actually start getting more men and women from our community to actually feel comfortable to start having those conversations and the bigger conversations around fertility issues and what to do and how to navigate that journey? I think that is something that we need in the community.
Oh, yeah, 100%. One of the big motivating factors is, like I was saying earlier on, about how Black women are disproportionately affected by infertility, be it by, sort of like social factors or just sort of like bedside manner, and we do have the V3 that I was referring to, whereby it's more social. The groups that that we've created, there's some that are standard that we have created, and the others that members will or can create. But the other one of the other features that we are working on, and I'll just caveat that we are working on it. We haven't really put this into production yet, but we are hoping that we can have a way of streaming sort of like podcasts that are relevant to different communities, right? All about fertility, and all about and for women. So there is going to be a space, whereby we will be catering, and we'll make sure that we can feed information that will help Black women and women of color, for sure, 100%.
Amazing. And I think it's very powerful to have these conversations. The fact is, the former First Lady of the United States, Michelle Obama, shared her IVF journey. Not a lot of people know are aware of this. So I think we need to start looking at how to break the biggest misconceptions around fertility, especially in the community. I think that's actually going to be one of the next things that I think should be the conversations, because I think those stigmas, the misconceptions, the role the church plays can actually hinder that conversation.
Very much so. And I think also, as women, we need to be kinder to each other in these conversations. I think throughout our journey, I had a lot of women within the family, within the, our community, wider community, approach me. And it was just the manner in which it was done. It was never done in a way to come alongside and support. It was always in a way to belittle, in a way to cause contention. And I think we need to be kinder to each other as women and support each other, because every one of us knows somebody who's had a miscarriage, but we do not talk about it.
Yeah, and that's the reason why, by the way, Lillian, this was really important for us to come on here, is that, we have, sort of like debated about how open we want to be about this, or then we were like, well, no, wait a minute. I mean, imagine the amount of people who could help, sharing the story. And, we want to encourage others who've gone through a similar journey and had success, to also speak up, because, it's crippling. This is really, really, really crippling. I mean, we're talking as Black people in the UK, but, we've had, horror stories, from Nigeria, from Zimbabwe, from, parts of Africa, whereby, this is highly stigmatized and, frowned upon. So it is important that we continue to speak out.
And it's really appreciated, because for me, I think that we need to have those conversations. We cannot stand on the sidelines and say, oh, well, it's somebody else's journey to deal with that. You've gone through the most amazing journey to bring your child into this world. And I think being able to stand up and talk about it, you might be saving another couple some great agony. You might be saving a couple from even breaking up because they don't know the first thing about how to support each other on the journey. Because you both mentioned something, Natalie, when you mentioned that going through the miscarriages that you went through, that Alex was always supporting you, and that it takes a level of strength and maturity to actually look up and go, but he also needs the support as well. And so knowing that conversation needs to be had, how do we support the men who are going through a miscarriage with their partner? Yes, they didn't physically miscarry, but how do you support them mentally? How do you support them emotionally? And I think those conversations, because I think there's still the misconception around men, their emotions, and all of that, especially for Black men.
Yes.
I also think that, getting counseling, seeking, so I think there is the kind of like the scientific kind of medical help that you can get on this journey. And then there's sort of like the alternative therapies, including coaching and counseling, that I think are really important. I think there is a time, when we were talking about this recently, that, because like each time you go through a failed cycle, you're going through some form of trauma.
Yeah.
And, you do have to seek the necessary help. I mean, like Natalie and I we went about it the wrong way, in that we kind of just, after each failed cycle, would say, well, what are we going to do next? And then we just plan the next one, But there was a point, I think, just before the last cycle, whereby we did acknowledge that we probably were suffering from PTSD at that point, because there'd just been so much trauma, so much loss. Get to the point where you're doing the 12th cycle, your body is taking a battering, as in Natalie's body is taking a battering. As a husband, I'm doing the best that I can to support at the same time, you're trying to juggle the finances. I think at that point we'd spent like £50,000, and it's not like we had £50,000 laying around. So all of that starts to really stress, and it's really important that you seek help. You talk to people who can help you navigate mentally, so that you don't make the wrong decisions or really just fall over, because that's another thing that we've seen.
Yes, I mean, there are some couples we know who've gone through numerous IVF cycles, and then they've finally got their miracle baby, and then they've split up, which is the saddest thing ever. And I think you need to look after each other in the process. And even for speaking to the couple who don't know what to do, who haven't sought medical treatment, is start by looking out for each other. Start by, supplementing, start by having a better lifestyle. And I think also when we talk of taking ownership, is that this is your journey. It's your story between you and your partner, and seek help, and own it. And I think that's why for us talking about our journey, even afterwards, now that we've had our baby, is important, is that it's still our journey. This is the way he got here.
And I think that's actually quite powerful when you're talking about taking care of each other. So I guess my question would be, what self-care practices did you put in place during the IVF journey? Did you put anything in place to make sure that you were taking care of yourselves?
Oh, yes. In fact, I think we took very good care of ourselves. So there were certain things like we did a lot of juicing. So good diet, nutrition is very important. I had we both had acupuncture and cupping and massage therapy. I had massages very often just because of all the pain and everything that comes with the injections and everything. There were spa days I had. We went on holiday in between failed cycles, because in a way it was our way of just kind of catching our breath again before we, went out to battle, for lack of a better term. And there was also just taking time out just to spend time together and reconnect, so that the marriage wasn't just about IVF.
That's very crucial. I think that right there, where you actually made the effort to take care of each other, is actually very crucial. So that's very interesting. I think looking at where Fertility Zone is, it's in its birthing stage, is brand new. What do you want the legacy of Fertility Zone to be?
I think it's really about helping, and informing and making fertility a mainstream issue, like the way people talk about mental health, or the way people talk about, other sort of like health challenges. I want fertility to be mainstream, as in that it's recognized as something that deserves a lot more attention than it's currently getting.
Yeah.
That for me would be a big win. Not so much about, hitting a certain level of revenue or EBITDA. Yes, that would be that's obviously welcome, right? Because we've invested a sizable chunk in the app itself, but having it being like a national or an international relevant topic that would help address or get the kind of sort of like attention or assistance that's required, that would be great. We talked about spending 50,000 over 6 years, right?
Yeah.
All right. So not everyone has got 8-9K a year to spend on fertility. We are blessed. We're sharing this because it's important for people to understand that it's also expensive. Does it need to be that expensive? I don't think so. If I tell you the differences between having treatment in the UK versus having treatment like in Greece or the Czech Republic, it just shows that there's a big disparity in terms of that are sort of like factors that need to be looked at from a national healthcare system perspective, right? So in that regard, let's talk about it more. Let's highlight the fact that there are people out there in underserved communities who have got fertility challenges, who probably can't afford to go and, spend the kind of money that we did. But it doesn't mean that they shouldn't be afforded the same kind of care. Yeah. And I think it's raising that debate, raising that topic, that would be a big win for me.
Yeah. And for me, I think it's having Fertility Zone as the go-to platform for fertility conversations would be a win. And if another couple does not have to go through numerous cycles and numerous miscarriages, that's a win.
And that's a very powerful win. So how can people connect with the Fertility Zone?
Yeah, so we are on Twitter, fertility_zone, and on Instagram, just Fertility Zone. So the app is on Android and iOS. Version 3 should be live by the time this is public and this is released. So it will have all sort of like the social sort of like functionality, the forum we've talked about. Or they can go to fertility.zone and they can go to all of those platforms via the desktop website.
Okay. So fertility.zone, is that .com or .co.uk?
Just .zone.
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 Okay, so www.fertility.zone, you'll find it there. It's on the platforms in terms of the app is on iOS or Android. You can download it. It's something that if you are going through this journey, do not go through it alone. Alex and Natalie, thank you both for sharing your story with me. And it was good to actually hear Joshua in the background. Last question. As African parents, are you going to remind Joshua every time he does something bad? Like, do you know what we did to have you?
So, do you know what, right? I'll tell you this. In closing, I'll tell you this. There's a good friend of mine, and Indian Kenyan, and they went through the same process, and they spent a similar amount to what we did. And he was just joking, saying that his uncles and his aunts, they say, so you spent 50K for him to behave like this and whatnot. But the funny thing was, he said that right, you don't even think about it. You don't even
because of the joy they bring.
The joy that they bring, and he brings us joy every single day.
He certainly does.
Awesome.
We're very happy.
It's been amazing having you both. I'm actually looking forward to reading a book from both of you soon, because you should have a book. I'm, just saying. And if you do get the book out, 10% finder's fee.
Okay.
First. But no, both of you, Natalie, Alex, thank you for being on the show to actually talk about the birth of Fertility Zone through your own fertility journey and the journey that you took. That 12 cycles and 50,000 pounds journey. And it's not the money, it's everything in between. And that taking that ownership of your body. So people, this is a wrap. I want you to go and look out for the Fertility Zone. If you have questions, reach out to them via the website, download the app, and ask the question so that you do not go on this journey alone. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome.
You've been listening to The Shine Out Loud Show. If you want to connect with us or let us know what you thought of today's show, be sure to follow us on Twitter @Shine Out Show.